DreamWorks' The Wild Robot. The movie that everyone knew was gonna be amazing. Except for me. I made no secret that I kinda held some skepticisms about the film. Admittedly, some of that was just because I was already quite familiar with the machines in nature trope. However, when the second trailer showed the animals talking after this wordless masterpiece we got with the trailer, I was a bit disappointed. I'd guessed it was coming, as I mean, even in that first trailer, they listed a hefty voice cast. However, part of me thought that maybe it would have been other robots or humans or something. And so, from the marketing anyway, I was hesitant. However, I left my expectations at the door and just sat down to take in the movie at hand. And by the time I left the cinema, I could finally join the wild robot hype train. I worked it out during the movie. It didn't take the ending for me to be on board, but you get the idea. Which is why today we're going to be diving in and getting into why this movie is as incredible as it is. And may very well just win the Best Animated Feature at the Oscars this year. But before the movie gets cracking, I'd like to quickly stop by the Wild Robots version of the DreamWorks ident, as there's a pretty cool detail that I think is pretty deliberate. Firstly, great to see some Madagascar characters get some love after initially being left out in the earlier versions. However, the two that are significant to Wild Robots specifically is How to Train Your Dragon and The Croods both being featured. Reason being, these are the two other DreamWorks movies from Wild Robot director Chris Sanders. If it was just Toothless as usual, I wouldn't have thought anything of it. I think he'll be as regular as Shrek is on this kind of thing. However, with the Croods popping up there as well, it feels a lot more deliberate. And I like the idea that they could do the same with other returning characters with this logo. Anyway, on to the movie itself. We open with Roz waking up for the first time, having evidently crashed in some capacity. From the get-go, I think it's clear that the filmmakers were fully aware of the dreaded WALL-E comparisons with this character and her design as well. Which was wise. I literally had WALL-E in my head from the first teaser trailer without really being able to help it. Though it is interesting to mention that this is an intentional redesign from DreamWorks. The initial book version of the Wild Robot, that's a square bot right there. Even still, going back to WALL-E, for some time now, that has been the definitive lone robot in a future wilderness movie. For very understandable reasons, it's quite a specific premise. However, here, the design couldn't really be more different. Tall, humanoid, spherical character design, a complete reverse of our binocular-faced friend on treads.
Wow.
Also, she's fully capable of coherent speech. Which is a first strike against my apprehensions of this movie not being more minimal in its dialogue. I mean, having her immediately talking is a big statement of, that's all well and good that you like the silent aspects of WALL-E.
I am Rosm7134.
But that's not the movie we're doing here. At times, I still think they could have afforded to have her talk less, as what she's talking about is pretty self-explanatory, and admittedly, it did take me a couple minutes to acclimatize to Lupita Nyong'o's voice in the opening scene while she's in full robot mode. However, on the whole, the dialogue element works for this movie. And Lupita is great for the role, being particularly fantastic at portraying the gradual emotional development of the character. Faced with a bewildered family of otters, Roz's introduction of herself is slick in introducing two key things to get the premise going. One, her function is a personal service robot, establishing that this is not a dedicated exploration mission and she is very much not supposed to be here. Two, she's a couple parts short from the crash.
A Rosm always completes its task,
judging by the fact that she's offering her services to a bunch of otters. It's a clear and accessible way to communicate the premise near immediately, so the movie can just get on with its story. An exposition dump of sorts, having Roz just say what she is, but that is an established trope of what robots just do. You can get away with it here because it makes sense that this service robot would explain herself and her company's jargon on activation. Also, you thought Pixar's portrayal of By and Large in WALL-E was ballsy when they have Disney as the parent company. DreamWorks are just out here with the looming corporation being straight up called Universal Dynamics. And while true, I'm pretty sure that's what it was called in the books. However, I can't help but think that some of the production enjoyed that little detail, considering how Universal are also specifically messing DreamWorks around as a company at the moment. Anyway, this exchange is short-lived as Roz is immediately thrown into the elements. She gets hit by a wave, water breaks robot, end of movie. Oh no, thankfully this one's waterproof. Otherwise, your movie about a robot stranded on a forest-covered island's going to have way too many hurdles, of course. course. Also, considering a lot of smartphones are now waterproof, it's not hard to believe that robots in the semi-distant future wouldn't be the same. This sequence of Roz is also the first full demonstration of the level of animation on display here. We've had the live comic book that is Spider-Verse, we've had the fairy tale storybook look of Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, and now we have this movie just being a living portrait. Some of the frames in this film are just astounding. Sony may have introduced the style, but I love how DreamWorks have pushed how far they can go with it. They know that Pixar are the guys who can achieve that uber realism, which they don't really need to join in on. Instead, they can be a contrast to that. And that's fittingly best encapsulated when you look at the animation in WALL-E and The Wild Robot. After quickly learning that continually getting hit by these waves isn't the best idea, Roz moves on to what is the next standout quality in this movie, and that being her adaptability to other creatures around her. As soon as she starts observing the crabs and copying their movements to climb up the cliff, I knew we were in for a good movie. This said to me, we've taken our attention to detail seriously. Of course, the credit for this isn't on the filmmakers alone. I can imagine how these sequences of Roz adapting to surrounding behaviors were translated from thoroughly detailed paragraphs in the original book. On to the first funny of the movie.
Need assistance?
Great, solid funny, that. It's the dry and blunt gags that I like the best. And that's just consistent with the overall voice of this movie. Whilst there are warmer moments that break away from being nature accurate, it also makes sure that the more brutal elements of nature are left intact. When your story relies on a fish out of water character being thrown into the wilderness, you have to be true to that wild element. Death isn't just present, it is a common and unceremonious matter of fact in the animal kingdom, which only becomes apparent as we get into the central relationship of the story.
Ready to receive my first task.
But before that, Roz starts wandering this strange environment in search of people she can assist. All the while, we see the animals that occupy this island look on in both bewilderment and suspicion. The animation also continues to showcase that unique approach to Roz's movement. She doesn't just awkwardly step over obstacles like a person would, she's more flexible than that. Offering a badger to do its banking, we also get further evidence that she's missing some data post-crash. Either that or the humans of the future just thought it'd be funny for robots to think that animals needed a bank account. Also, nice to see stickers are still going on in the future. We love to see it. She better be careful though. As we see how many animals she proceeds to put stickers on, I can already see paragraphs in a Facebook comic section explaining why you shouldn't put stickers on animals. We also get to see more of her adaptability, followed by another funny.
Rosms are programmed for instant physical mimicry.
Looks like I'll be getting a nice healthy dose of slapstick from this movie, most important part of my comedy diet. This only continues after what is initially a beautiful butterfly sequence. Until...
Aggression detected.
I said it'd be brutal. That bird gets full-on beheaded in this sequence, and it's played for laughs. Didn't see that one in Over the Hedge, did ya? DreamWorks has grown up. Realizing that she won't be able to handle the needs of this chaos so easily, we then get the part that does a lot in helping me buy into the talking of animals in this movie. As she powers down into learning mode, we get an in-universe reason why she is then able to understand the animals around her. Of course, it still doesn't really cross into being realistic, unless all animals speak the same invisible language that allows every non-human species to talk to each other. However, in the world and story of this story, they make the narrative tool believable. The fact that not only can you see her progress in analyzing the animal's communications, but you also see the days pass while she's doing it. It just makes the moment she can start to understand the animals talking feel more earned, that it wasn't an instantaneous process. You know, it took time. It's not just a Disney movie where blink and the characters are just talking to you because, oh, the animals talk in this world, you know? And introducing herself to the animals, it goes about as well as you'd expect. I like how initially the animals are portrayed as this blunt, unwelcoming community. You can see the attitudes of these characters also being human residents in an isolated village, Smearensburg in Klaus being a prime example. These animals are just like Smearensburg residents, constantly at odds with each other and definitely not open to outsiders. From their perspective, Roz rises from the dead and everyone runs away, leaving Roz coming to the conclusion that she is not needed here. Cue another incredible landscape shot. However, her plans to call home are throttled as typically, she's struck by lightning.
lightning-y!
Unfortunately, what's waiting for Roz on the other side of this strike is a bunch of raccoons pulling her guts out. We're going the Transformers 1 logic that it's not horrific because they're only robots. Yeah. Still bizarre we had these two incredible robot movies within weeks of each other, both deserving a lot more financially as well, especially poor old Transformers 1. And at this point, you realize how invested you already are in the character as she's ransacked by these raccoons. And again, the inventiveness in how these different parts work together to fight off the raccoon doesn't go unnoticed. Gotta be honest, a horrible part of me wanted the raccoon to be electrocuted here too. Initially managing to fend them off, Roz then makes the mistake of presenting her tracking signal.
Pretty. Get it!
Onto the comical ball of raccoons on the tree, showing that this movie is gonna bring out the silliness every now and again. Nice, it's a good balance. But it's not over yet, as Roz chases after the one remaining raccoon still holding onto the homing beacon. And as said raccoon runs into a cave before immediately running out again, I think we can all guess what's coming. Indeed, Roz gets her Revenant moment getting chased down by a bear. The perfect slow escalation of this island. The camera movement in this sequence is constantly in motion whilst not blurring any of the action within the scene. There's no Michael Bay nonsense here, thank you for that. In itself, a suspenseful chase sequence, but it leads up to the defining moment of the movie. As Roz gets knocked out by the bear, she falls onto what looks like a nest, and this whole scene is so sensitively handled. It's one thing having a crab being snatched for lunch, it's a whole other thing portraying your protagonist accidentally killing a family of birds. You could have easily found a version of this story where Roz accidentally stumbles upon an abandoned egg and that's it. Even with this initial setup, you could have later revealed that one of the predators was actually responsible for this instead of Roz accidentally crushing them. But no, the wild robot doesn't take the easy way out. The raising of the mother's lifeless wing is all we needed for that gut punch moment without taking it too far. Not a word said, we're just given what's visually in front of us. And that's such a good, conscious choice to make. In animation, we see so many different takes on portraying death to younger viewers. Oftentimes, these movies are how children are introduced to the concept of death before it's necessarily come into their own lives. In a movie that holds its truth in being a frank portrait of nature, quite literally when it comes to this animation style, it feels like a more than appropriate canvas to tackle that topic. With this example, there was no villainous intent, not even a hungry predator. It just happens, as it often does. And though it's not Roz's fault, this extra layer of her adopting the egg just adds a depth of responsibility that you wouldn't get if she just found it. The fact that she ultimately does grow a sense of responsibility because of what she did does so much more for both the movie's central relationship and buying into the emotional growth of this robotic character. Nature once again being swift, the egg is quickly nabbed by the Pedro Pascal fox. From the raw, brutal beat we've just had, we seemingly descend into what is, for all intents and purposes, a slapstick Looney Tunes type sequence. And somehow, it's not jarring in the slightest. The balance of both humor and emotion throughout this can't be overstated, the momentum in the pacing just never faltering. It's a fun sequence while still consistently being within the movie's portrayal of nature. On this island, if you don't hold on to something, someone else will. The fox, or as we're soon to learn he's called Fink, is not just being a thief for the sake of it, it's just his survival skills. Even in the chase, the choices made of initially only using animal sounds reminds you that this is an animal adhering to its nature. However, and here's a sentence I don't get to say very often, once the fox lands in the porcupine and the robot helps pull all the needles out of his face, the Pedro Pascal voice is fully on. No, he just runs away again. Instead, what we get is one of the most important scenes in the movie. No biggie. Once again, Roz's actions based on her own internal logic are so well realized. From the damage she took, she has no experience with how an egg works, so of course, she tries to fix it once it starts cracking. After quickly learning that's not how it works, the little gosling is revealed. Cue wholesome lighting up sequence. Even though it's quickly cut short, as it transpires Roz does not understand the situation whatsoever, this one moment is still paramount in establishing their bond. Even if she didn't understand it at the time, her lighting up when the gosling nuzzles her face establishes a connection, most likely reflecting the emotions of the gosling. But yeah, that would be wholesome moment being cut short, like that's also just very funny.
How would you rate my performance?
As Roz attempts to restart her tracking beacon, it grows pretty clear that this gosling's instincts have also made some decisions. Both are just following their factory programming. but neither programming is currently working out for each other. The blending of animal tweets and child voice does take a moment to get used to, but I'd say they're generally successful with blending the voices and the animals. Enter the family of possums.
I'm Rowan. Bartlett was last letter?
What I love about this bit is that we get to see how they've brought the nature-accurate attitudes to the characters' dialogue. This possum has had so many litters, she can't even keep up with how many she's had. Love it.
Where's your mommy, little guy?
Mike Wazowski!
Cue the play dead gag, which thankfully isn't identical to the over-the-hedge one. Or the Ice Age one. Hard to do when that's literally what possums are known for.
Like faster. Meningitis takes a while.
That is absolute gold.
Now we're gonna get killed for real.
Sorry, Mom.
Obviously, there's an element of absurdity to this bit, but it again directly feeds into informing the context of this world. Here, death is just as matter-of-fact as that. It's just how it is. However, soon realizing the monster isn't killing anybody, Pinktail delivers the key bit of information for the movie going forwards.
Goslings imprint on the first thing they see. You.
You could have probably got through the whole movie without having it spelt out to you like that, but ultimately the priority for the filmmakers is that the viewers of all ages are caught up to speed. Plus, in narrative, Roz clearly needs this spelt out for her.
Programming to be a mother.
We just make it up.
Well, I think that's suddenly got real for a lot of people. It's a nice twist on the classic mother-to-mother exchange. We've seen the normal version of this scene done many times before, so why not spice it up with a possum talking to a robot that's adopted a gosling after squashing the real mom? Unless that's been done before. And as much as Roz wants to get out of it, she gets totally checkmated into the gig.
Taking care of him is your task.
Whoops, can't get out of that one now. As well as being a turning point that likely speaks to a lot of people who've experienced unexpected pregnancy and shortly afterwards parenthood, this is the sort of start of the hero's journey for Roz. Her quest is set and it's to raise this little gosling. But before we move on, we do need to hold space for the darkest joke in the movie.
Mother of 7. 6.
For such a warm movie, I love the blunt sense of humor running through it. Roz is left with 3 key goals from Pinktail, that being for him to be able to eat, to swim, and fly by fall. 3 steps that fit very pleasingly into Roz's little eye graphics.
Like your baby. Hope it doesn't die.
More pleasing is her initial simplistic interpretations of said tasks.
Fly.
And now we get to hear the Pascal take on the fox.
Allow me to introduce myself. Think.
I know he's in everything at this point, but I do enjoy him in this role. Sure, there's an air of some Nick Wilde from Zootropolis tropes in there, but what Pedro brings is a more vulnerable performance that reflects the dangerous environment that Fink is trying to survive in on his own. Be warned, this fox will make you cry. However, initially he approaches Roz with the understanding that he may be able to help to his own advantage.
It's okay. I won't eat him. Are you crazy? I might eat him.
Again, the humor being completely based in this world's mechanics and instinct is something I cannot appreciate enough. In order to buy into the significance of various characters breaking their programming later on in the movie, it's crucial to first establish how deep-rooted this programming is. It's just good theme building. Of course, Fink first helps with the eating step.
Here you go, kid.
However, after initially presenting as more self-centered, he does actually start helping fairly early doors. Though still gunning for the food, of course.
All these kids do.
Although, as we soon learn, Fink has his own reasons for why he quickly adopts the safety and company of Roz. Which is again refreshing, adding an extra dimension to this scrounging archetype. Quite often, that's all there is to them, but this movie goes for a more sympathetic portrayal of this character type. As we also learn in this scene, Fink wasn't treated so well as a kid, as hinted at from
Teach him the way my mom taught me. Swim!
Which gives some context to why he may be looking for company and a sense of safety that he's never really had before. Less refreshing is this story trope still showing up.
I terminated his family.
You probably want to keep all that to yourself.
Yep, it's the setup for the inevitable characters fallout sequence later on, but hey, they're kinda mandatory. I did ultimately get on board with this version of it. It is quite a big bombshell after all, and it works for this story. It is a different take on the trope to a certain extent, but that would be one of my nitpicks if I had to have one, just because we've seen that play out so many times, you know? Anyway, moving on from the overexposure to animated movie plotlines, we are again reminded of the matter-of-fact attitude towards mortality and survival on this island, as Fink tells Roz that even if his family survived, this run to the litter wouldn't have lasted long anyway.
Don't get too attached to the little guy.
Even in The Lion King, where we get frank messages about mortality and a death that scarred a whole generation of children, we only get this perspective from the top predator. we don't get the same circle of life conversations from those lower down the food chain who just kind of accept that a bunch of them will get killed off on the way. Here, it's not even a circle, it's more pessimistic than that in many ways. It gives more weight to Roz's responsibility. You know, she isn't just quirkily stumbling her way through raising this kid. If she makes a wrong move here, this little guy will die. Roz begins her steps towards this monumental task by taking a note from Paddler the Beaver. What more can I say? It's Matt Berry as a beaver. You can't fault it.
The process is the art.
Once again adapting to the behavior of the animals around her, she completely mimics the beaver's approach to house building, admittedly stealing it in the process. I just love how the bulk of her actions in adapting to her environment, whether for herself or the gosling, stems from what she observes. Whilst it's established as part of her programming, the fact that she's progressively building her instincts from reflections of the animal's behavior makes her increasingly a product of this island, fulfilling the wild robot brief. After all, this scene highlights how she genuinely has no memory of where she came from.
I do not know my origin point.
Also, as the gosling continually insinuates on helping the building with his little twigs, Roz does end up reluctantly letting him partake whilst being visibly frustrated by the situation, all gives us our first taste that she's growing beyond her programming. Her transition from robot to mother has begun, because she's frustrated. And thus, the house is built and ready for use. And as they settle down, Roz faces her next challenge of naming her little task. And I think that is one of the best examples of this kind of scene. True, a lot of the versions of these naming scenes that I have issues with are when it's based on an existing character. You know, when they have to get to that iconic name, but you have to try and make it look like it came naturally.
Scooby! Dooby? Do.
All right.
Here, they don't have IP member berries to appease, but even then, they made sure it was a name that you could believe this robot putting together. And her trying to even get there is hilarious.
Gosling 0186. His numbering is out of sequence.
Eventually landing on Brightbill. The other great touch in this scene is how Roz has impacted his behavior.
Processing. Beep, beep, boop, boop.
Probably an obvious beat to hit, but these little notes of Roz's nurture rubbing off on Brightbill's understanding of the world are vital points to hit for this story. Speaking of which, we have our next check-in of the don't tell him about his squished mum arc, with Fink and Roz once again choosing to tell a version of the story that glosses over that. Whilst feeding into that beat for later, the more interesting development in this scene is both Roz and Fink telling him the story, establishing that Fink himself is now also growing into a parental figure. What a development from wanting to eat this kid. Hello there, they can make it to the halfway mark of this video. Come along and subscribe if you haven't already. You know the deal at this point. More amazing episodes to come throughout the year of 2025. But for now, let's get back to the second half of DreamWorks' amazing Wild Robot. It's also a big deal considering what his parents were like to him.
Grow up without something, spend a lot of time thinking about it.
Oh, that's such a profound line. It's a great moment for both Fink and the three of them as a unit. And if that wasn't enough for the Feels department, they had to throw in the three of them huddling together, didn't they?
I miss her when she sleeps too.
In a very short bit of movie, the connection between these three characters is set up despite the bulk of said connection being unspoken. You can just see it on screen. And it's a good job because in the next scene, he's now a full-on adolescent. Yeah, they just Simba'd us. However, rather than Hakuna Matata, Brightbill's surrogate parents are trying to get him to swim. In some ways, I would have liked to have had one more chunk with Brightbill as a baby. You know, this transition was quite sudden. However, even if there was an extra scene, I can see why it was probably cut, as this is the next logical step for the story. And as sudden as it feels, it does also just speak to how quickly most animals develop. If anything, we're the weird ones who take 21 to 25 years to fully grow. Most of the animal kingdoms got through several generations by that point. We continue to see Roz's imprint as a mother on Brightbill.
Jumbo, I am Gosling 0186.
However, this being the brutal place that's been established, that goes about as well as you'd expect.
Look what we have here.
The freak show is on the other side of the lake.
Yeah, the douche characters have arrived. While some of the animals have embraced Roz, clearly the geese are not on board with the monster and her attempt to raise someone they consider a runt. Which I got a vibe of when they started actively drowning him, to which Roz immediately responds, suggesting her parental instincts have also grown.
Right, Bill?
Sure, it also makes logical sense for her task that he doesn't die. That may be the why she responds, but it's the how she responds where there's clearly emotion in her voice that's slowly been developing over time. And her actions too. She damages her foot trying to reach him there. Unfortunately, when you already have a gaggle of geese already prejudiced against you, I've always wanted to say that, your dismembered hand turning up to save the day ain't quite gonna land well. Initially, it looks like they're talking about Roz, but nope, it's a whole other kettle of fish. Well, actually, it's one single fish. It's bad news is what I'm trying to tell you. After an obligatory moment of mild peril, she does eventually save him. Unfortunately, the a-hole geese have stuck around to rub their bit of salt in.
Why do you attack me? Because you are a run.
Oof, have to be careful with the diction of that line. I could also say the same to you, buddy. And after a couple more bits of discrimination,
He is not our kind.
it's time for the killer blow.
Let's just go, Mom.
You think that thing is your mother?
Oh my god, just leave the guy alone! And because these characters are just the worst, they even throw in revealing his tragic backstory for good measure.
That thing killed your mother.
Quite appropriate that they're birds, because these guys would absolutely thrive on Twitter. The damage is done, though I do like how defensive Fink of Roz gets here.
Now I know who to eat first.
Even as we get into the tough conversation with Brightbill, he remains protective of her.
It wasn't her fault, kid.
Unfortunately for him, the learning your adopted mother killed your real one conversation was never going to be a smooth one. As frustrating as it is to watch, you can't really blame the guy for being upset.
I really thought you were my family.
Oh, the dialogue is piercing and you genuinely feel hurt for Roz.
You don't feel anything.
You're not my mom.
The conversation ends there and our characters go into the inevitable post-conflict split-off. For Roz, this is finding the rest of her crash site, which gives her a full Wall-E-style infographic explaining what she really is.
These robots fit seamlessly into our communities.
And although it's also exposition, it fits so naturally at this point of the movie where there's an actual emotional pull in Roz's character development to have this greater world context revealed. In trying to work out what her purpose actually is, she consults one of the corpses of her fellow robots.
I am Rosm6262. Your name cannot have numbers.
Cue 2 minutes of Lupita Nyong'o talking to herself, which she pulls off incredibly well. You can tell how different the cadence and intonations in Roz are now completely different to this other factory setting robot, a reflection of her from the very start of the movie.
Your first task is to assist me in my task.
And yeah, she tries to pull a bit of a Mr. Meeseeks episode of Rick and Morty, claiming that her task is impossible, which again is a very relatable conclusion for how a lot of mothers often genuinely feel. It does feel impossible at times raising a child. There is no definitive way to do it properly, which for a robot with a directive as binary as completing a task is a recipe for complete existential breakdown. We love to see it.
I'm just making stuff up.
Her emotions bleeding through, and upon a quick scan, the other Rosm is horrified at the discovery that Roz has altered her programming in her now mothering role.
I have been overwriting my code for months.
In our early days of AI, this is certainly an interesting conversation to pose into this movie. The other Rosm gives up their tracking beacon to get this faulty unit back home. The movie now has its Chekhov's gun. We know it's going to be used at some point. Fink then finds her back in the same spot as earlier in the movie, once again ready to
Call the ones that made me.
It becomes clear from this scene that Roz now just wants to find where she fits in. However, there isn't time to dwell on that. The geese are getting ready to fly south. And whilst Roz doesn't feel like she's wanted right now, both of them still care about getting Brightbill to fly and, not die.
Your life is not negotiable.
Wow, all of these powerful lines we would have missed out on if they'd made this without any dialogue like I suggested. What a surprise, writing is good. Eventually, Brightbill agrees and we get a nice, solid backing track sequence. Again, a beat that most animated movies seem to want to hit, but it is a good one. The length Roz goes across in this sequence is as heartwarming as you can get. She runs with Brightbill to help with a head start. She then trips over doing this and so proceeds to spend the whole night building a runway for him. After this, he still thinks his wings are too small, so she climbs a mountain to get a falcon to help him. It's our old friend, actions speak louder than words. Even after Bright Bill rejecting her as his mother, she's still climbing mountains to help him. We even see her bleeding from how she's physically pushing through to make this work. Again, I'm sure that imagery speaks to a lot of mothers out there. We also see through details such as Paddler making her a new leg that at least some of the island's community are starting to warm up to her as well. In fact, it's all been going so well that it's time for the Bill Nye goose to fly in for some wisdom talk, as it's all otherwise coming together. Unlike any other goose in this movie, he actually wants to help him.
Feet cannot touch the ground. Understand?
Establishing that there's now only a week until they take off, Roz doubles down on his training. This shot of him pulling along a train with all the animals now involved is a personal highlight. That, and particularly the aerial shots here, just showcase some of the most stunning animation in the entire movie. As Bright Bill prepares to join the gaggle, can't get enough of that word by the way, a gaggle of geese, Longneck makes sure to put Bright Bill to rights in appreciating what Roz has done for him.
The accident that killed your family saved you.
Though pretty unconventional messaging there. If your family weren't dead, they would have just let you die. Or maybe even eaten him. I don't know how this stuff works.
This flight is a gift Roz has given.
At last, Bright Bill understands. Every scar in her paintwork, her leg that's now made of wood, it's all been for him. And just to cap it all off, we have this incredible sequence of all of them taken off, with Bright Bill asking if Roz would give him a boost one last time. Wherever you think this movie stands in the animation hierarchy, the image of her running alongside him about to take off must be considered as a new addition for an all-time iconic movie moment. Not just for what's on screen, but the symbolism behind it. Because it's the image of a parent running with their child until they are ready to fly away. And if it wasn't already clear that this has become so much more than a robot completing its task, despite finally being able to tick that last box, she's still there on the cliff edge, reaching out for his feather. Her task complete, she goes and returns to summoning her makers. Fink joins her, and supposedly their time together can stop here. Bright Bill's now gone, and yet there's a sense of reluctance.
Who says you need to leave?
Them, I guess.
Don't know about you, but I'm sensing a message about going against your programming in this movie. Don't know where I got that from. And from what Roz says next makes it crystal clear that there's been a change in her.
How do you know if you love something?
The actions required of her task now in the back mirror, there is no ambiguity left to question whether Roz has changed.
You should probably tell them.
What if it is too late?
Still, her programming flags this as wrong and she transmits her location. This time successfully, with a sudden whiplash of a cut to a futuristic human world. What's going on? I've been on an island this whole movie, this feels weird. Meanwhile, we have Bright Bill and co flying over the largely sunken Golden Great Bridge. Hey, the future sure looks fun. But also, it is such a fantastically well-timed reveal, with no words in it, surprisingly enough. Hey, I love that stuff. Beyond just the messaging of programming, motherhood, the wilds, and robots, there's this extra elemental theme of environmentalism that's just perfectly placed and done in a way that's, you know, not shoved down your throat, which is always nice.
I forgot to say something before I left.
Yet another all too relatable beat in this movie, although this time from a son or daughter's perspective. I think any of us can relate to a moment of feeling like they realized at too late a point to say I love you or even thank you to a mother figure. It's one of those revelations that seems so obvious once you've had it, yet beforehand you just have a prerequisite of, oh, of course they already know that, I don't need to say it. Sorry, Bright Bill, too late, I guess. And to be really cruel to the guy, as the geese head for shelter from an oncoming storm, the movie decides to do this to him.
Roz, what are you doing here?
Animal infestation.
Again, this movie can be brutal. And I'm not one of the kids affected by the formative Lion King level scars that'll be inevitably left by this movie too, so I totally dig it. Even if that means the death of the Bill Nye goose. Cooled as soon as I heard the line,
Ha! Glad I lived long enough to see that!
It also speaks to where human society is now, bringing out all that artillery just because these birds showed up. They're literally making dents in their own roof to kill some geese. Surely there's a better way to deal with this situation? But hey, it's human, so I totally buy it. Meanwhile, Roz wakes up with Fink right in front of her.
I may have turned off the transmitter.
However, it's not all fun and games, as Fink has actually left his underground spot as the weather conditions have grown so bad, and so they settle down and wait for all the other animals to die. I kid, of course, they go out and rescue them all. Well, Roz does, and drags Fink along, bringing everyone into their shelter. Of course, as they go and rescue the animals, the moment that people highlight is when they find someone who didn't make it. and they hit this moment exactly right. You don't need to see anything more than this, and nothing more needs to be said. When it comes to the even more serious moments of this movie, it chooses to mute the dialogue, and for doing so, creates a far more superior piece of artwork and storytelling. Just the look Roz gives Fink and you know exactly what's happened. Once again, even as we build to the "this would never happen" moment of all the animals working together to survive, the movie still makes sure to keep one foot in nature and not shying away from moments like this. There's also consequences to Roz herself, this winter storm meaning she has no access to sunlight to charge her batteries. However, instead of acting like a hungover idiot like Wally, she still pushes through to try and make sure everyone's safe, and does so with the defining line of this movie:
To survive, we must become more than we were programmed to be.
It was the only line in the teaser trailer for a reason. Not only does it unite the animals, but it also shows that Roz has now overcome the pressures from her programming. She's making her own choices now, yet still putting everything into helping others. And Fink's right there to make sure some respect is put on the table for that.
She risked everything to bring you here.
Roz calls for a truce so the animals won't eat each other during the storm.
I will not harm anyone.
Voiced by Mark Hamill, just to get that in there. And as Roz shuts down, Fink and the possums cuddle up to her to make sure at least half of us are crying by the end of the scene. When the sun returns and she boots back up, so have the birds. First of all, great touch having moss grow on her to communicate the passing of time. Roz is fully showing that robot in the wilderness chic now. As for her character, when she approaches the geese and sees Brightbill, her response makes complete sense.
He found where he belongs.
She can see that he's now settled with his kind and doesn't want to interfere with that. She likely still blames herself for why he didn't fit in the first place. She watches on before walking away. Fink, on the other hand, has no hesitation and runs straight to him. Hilarity ensues.
Welcome back!
Just a quick little funny before...
Blossom 7134.
Uh-oh! The robot ships arrive. There's a third layer to this movie as well. Not just the motherhood raising, not just the storm in the winter, the big, real big bad to really bring it all together. And I do appreciate how even the timeline has been thought through on this. Even though the transmitter made contact months ago, she's obviously then turned it off and, to boot, was completely offline and hidden during the winter. It sounds obvious enough, but there's a lot of movies that just don't bother to think through these basic kind of things.
You were not easy to find.
Ugh, her little tentacle hands just make this invasion of Roz's space seem even more sinister. It's really effective in getting that "we own you" energy from the character. And as head robot McGee greets her, who, by the way, looks a little bit like the aliens in Chicken Little, it doesn't take her long to notice something different about Roz.
I think I've forgotten something.
Oh dear, here come the Deathbot squad. Following on from their approach to the geese in their own building, they remain consistent with launching some devastating forest fires at complete disregard of the habitat they've just disrupted. So, you know, way more human than Roz, really. And again, it communicates an even more self-absorbed human race. As their technology developed alongside a clearly cataclysmic ecological crisis, it seems that they became more isolated and concerned with their own prosperity over the rest of nature. I mean, the vibe of the woodland population of this island feels more like a forest in present-day US, and judging by the Golden Gate Bridge situation, it stands to reason that this is all part of the US post-sea levels rising. Could be. However, like the rest of the movie, this is never really preached at the audience. As has been made abundantly clear, people hate being preached at. Whilst absolutely there, the environmental implications are much more of a subtext rather than so much in your face. The actions of these human-instructed robots say enough on their own, and in a sense makes a more nuanced piece of storytelling. It's just a superior way to do it sometimes.
You coming?
Into this climactic scene, and all the animals full-on revolt against the robots. Roz's actions during the winter not only gained eternal respect from the animals, but also united this once spiky community together. This truce may not be something that would actually happen in nature, though it's not all that ridiculous when you consider what happens around watering holes. However, the story being told here is more than that. It is that of a community learning to work together for
The greater good.
The greater good.
And as for Roz, after wondering throughout the movie where she fits in, her arc is finally fulfilled.
Tell them you're already home.
It is time for all of the payoffs, starting with the big one.
And I am a wild robot.
I usually hate the movie title being dropped in like this, but I kind of like it here. And yes, seeing them all come together to take down the robots is incredibly satisfying and entertaining. It's shameless entertainment, yet it all still ties into what the movie's already set up. It's all justified. Seeing Roz dodge the robots by using all of her animal mimicking adaptations, I just absolutely lap it up. Look at her playing dead like a possum, you gotta love it! And despite the forest fires putting everyone at dire straits, you've got to admit the visuals of the pink flames are absolutely gorgeous. And of course, the fires are caused through humanity's brashly thought out actions. That's genuinely how it often happens. Probably actually this color as well sometimes with those gender reveal parties. And once again, Roz gets carried away. And this time, it looks like her memories are going bye-bye for good.
Can I keep just one?
No.
Yep, it's time for another cry generator. As Roz's memories with Brightbill flash in front of her. And oh look, there he is, leading his gaggle army into battle with the ship. I did not expect this at the start of the movie, I'll be honest. But we can't have the audience relax in this situation in any way, as Brightbill injures his wing landing in the ship. Reaching the now lifeless Roz, our boy nuzzles up to once again inflict us with the feels.
I love you.
And of course, it brings her back to life. It's as sentimentally fluffy as you can get, but hey, I'm giving the movie a pass on this one. It's earned its moment. On to the best masquerading of a curse word in a family movie since Madagascar.
Male bovine excrement.
Kinda genius, honestly, and only made more perfect with that Matt Berry delivery. Yep, even the beaver gets some payoff after taking on insults from everyone else in the movie. Guess his wood carving doesn't look so ridiculous now, putting out all those fires. All that's left now is for Roz and Brightbill to escape, with a line from the villain robot that won't complicate things at all.
We will just keep coming until we have you.
But also, with Brightbill's wing damage, she needs to pull a Groot on this situation. Sort of. However, this We Are Roz moment has a deeper meaning as she tears out the programming she was given and replaces it with Brightbill. Yeah, it's about her heart. Cue badass jumping out of the ship as it blows up. And by the way, an unsung W for this movie is not subtly making Roz able to fly. I feel like with robot stuff, it's really easy to just add that in at any point, but they don't do it here and actually let the character face obstacles. Yeah, it's a good choice there, movie.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate my performance?
But unfortunately, all's not as simple as it seems.
They will just keep coming until they have me.
Because yes, after all of that, she chooses to leave anyway. Except on her own terms, so I guess there's that. Plus, probably best she avoided the first one. I'm pretty sure Vontra needed to be reported to HR.
You were not easy to find.
Anyway, here we are at the goodbye sequence. This final exchange between Brightbill and Roz is incredibly powerful, emphasizing that there is now more to her that they will never be able to take away from her. She's a robot with a soul, and you can't wipe out a soul with data. However, it's Fink's goodbye that really gets me.
You're my friend, and I never had one before, and...
This is a character who's only known his own loneliness but found a way out of it with Roz. It's easy to understand why it hits him the hardest.
What if I need to tell you something and you're not here?
And gotta give credit to Pedro Pascal with the vulnerability he gives Fink here as well. There's no phoning it in for money here, and I guess he has plenty of experiences of only using his voice to convey any emotional performance, considering, The Mandalorian. It's not someone playing a zany character here, it sounds like an actual person crying, giving it that extra gut punch coming from a little fox. It's also Roz's opportunity to highlight just how much the community on the island has changed and how that can be a lasting impact of her time here.
You came together as an island.
And yeah, I could audibly hear the sniffles in this bit.
This is my migration. I will find my way home.
I think we could all do with a hug from an island's worth of animals once in a while. Over to the resolution and they've got a goddamn snowman of her, just to rinse the final tears. Oh no, that badge goes to the final beat of the movie. Somehow there's still more. Now, back in the winter, the birds are migrating again, which of course is the perfect opportunity to visit the human colony that tried to kill them earlier. Only kidding, it's fine this time because Roz is actually the robot he encounters this time. Cue one more heartwarming shot for good measure, and that's it. Roll credits. Man. I've got to say, after being pretty apprehensive about this movie, I'd have absolutely no problem with this movie winning Best Animated Feature. The chaotic part of me wants Transformers 1 to win, but hey, it looks like we'll have some form of a robot winning. This is truly an excellent movie, and I would say one of DreamWorks' best. If this, Bad Guys, and Puss in Boots 2 are any indication of where DreamWorks is heading, I think we have a lot to be excited about. Will it continue now that they're outsourcing a bunch of their animation? Who knows? I certainly hope so, because this is some of the true highlights of the writing department behind DreamWorks, even if this is just a book adaptation. They may have also put out the likes of Kung Fu Panda 4, and don't even get me started on them letting Peacock make those abominable Megamind projects. However, on the whole, if Disney take note of what they have achieved with The Wild Robot here, I think we could look forward to a lot of really great movies from the studio still. I certainly hope that to be the case anyway. This was DreamWorks' amazing Wild Robot. A movie that'll hopefully only grow to become an animated classic for a whole new generation. And if it's only downhill from here, boy was it a good way to end off the saga of DreamWorks. For now though, my name's been Daz. Thank you very much for reaching the end of this review. Let me know your thoughts on The Wild Robot, and I shall see you all in a little bit.